Next thing I knew, I was taken to a webpage that said, "We have determined that your Facebook page goes against our community standards on account of a particular violation we call impersonation." I said to no one in particular, "Impersonation? Who do they think I'm impersonating? I'm trying to impersonate a successful podcast business, and suspending the podcast's page will not help much." Hello, and welcome to episode 29 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of September 9, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including a new college marching band, a demonstration of quiet dignity and grace in the face of stunning disappointment, a moment of intense worry, and I fire up the BandWagon Wayback Machine. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. It seems like this episode has turned into one of those that features a lot of storytelling. There's a tale of woe that had a happy ending after all. There's a tale of woe that really kind of didn't. There's another call to action asking for some of your stories. And there's a series of my stories that are all in the service of a commemoration of a significant anniversary. There is an outside chance that some of my listeners who have seen the episode artwork may know what it signifies, but most others will wonder about it and wonder why I'm shown clutching a 2x4. All will become clear because, yep, that's the story too. So, find your basketball band shirt, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Calvin University has launched its first ever marching band program. The inaugural band director is Dr. Steve Suda. Since 1999, Suda has established and led marching bands at several institutions, including Dickinson State University in North Dakota. Suda said, quote, "Marching bands hold a special place in the heart of a community. They create a strong connection between the university and the public, offering a window into the vibrancy of a school's music program. A successful marching band can uplift the identity of an institution and become a cherished tradition." Suda said he's confident that the program will potentially reach 60 to 80 members within 3 years. He's starting with 20. He also stressed the importance of incorporating faith into the marching band experience. Calvin University was founded in 1876 as Calvin College, a private educational institution of the Christian Reformed Church, and stands in the Reformed Calvinist tradition. Dateline, New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Gregory Shreckengost of Jacksonville, North Carolina, passed away on August 22, 2024. He was 49 years old. Most recently, Shreckengost was band director at Trexler Middle School in Richlands, North Carolina, and music director at Northwoods United Methodist Church in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Originally from New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Shreckengost studied music education and performance at Indiana University of Pennsylvania and completed a Bachelor of Science degree in music education at Clarion University. He spent his entire teaching career with North Carolina's Onslow County Schools, starting at Dixon Middle School in 2005, moving to Richlands High School in 2007, and then to Trexler Middle School 2 years ago. Shreckengost served from 2014 to 2016 as president of the North Carolina Music Educators Association District 14 and was a member of North Carolina Bandmasters Association Eastern District, the North Carolina Music Educators Association, the National Association for Music Education, and Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia Fraternity. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. On the other side of this brief break, I have a tiny follow-up to last week's conversation with pipe band leader Maureen Connor. It's a story of elegant responses to unfortunate circumstances. This is BandWagon. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, a question for you to set up the story I'm about to tell. How do you deal with disappointment? If you listened to last week's trio section, you heard my conversation with Maureen Connor, who leads the Capital District Youth Pipe Band. Maureen was describing the pipe band activity and its centerpiece competition event, the World Pipe Band Championships, which happened back on August 17th and 18th in Glasgow, Scotland, and which her band attended. More than 200 bands from 13 countries competed. Of the 28 bands in Capital District's division, only 12 could make finals, and Capital District did, and did very well. After the Novice Juvenile B Division's final round competition, scores were announced, and on the Capital District Band's official Facebook page, this message was posted. Quote, "We could not be any prouder of this Grade 4 band. They got second place in the Novice Juvenile B Division and first place in drumming. Congratulations." Then, things got weird. Drum corps fans of a certain age, yeah, this is a tangent, but hang in there, there's a point to it. Those drum corps fans may remember the 1996 DCI finals, during which Blue Devils and Phantom Regiment ended up in a flat-footed tie for first place. And there was much disappointment, consternation, booing in the stadium. How in the world, in an activity judged down to the 100th of a point, could two ensembles tie for the title? Hold that thought, or rather, hold that frustration, hold that head-scratching so intense it threatens to draw blood. On Monday, August 19th, RSPBA Vice Chairman Paul Brown posted a message on the association's website about a serious error that had happened during score tabulation, an error which was not detected until after the awards announcements, until after everybody had gone home. He wrote, "The Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association would like to publicly apologize to the bands who have been impacted by a compiling error in determining the result of the Grade 4B final at the World Pipe Band Championships at Glasgow Green. It was identified that the drumming and ensemble scores and adjudicators had been reversed during the data capture of the placing sheets. The result of the Grade 4B final was updated to reflect the drumming and ensemble placings specified by the appointed adjudicators, and this had an impact on the winners of both the band and drumming prizes. The association chairman has written an apology to both the bands involved, which needed to be completed before this communication could be issued. We understand the membership depended on us to accurately compile the adjudicator placings and deeply regret we failed to deliver the high standard that you've come to expect from the RSPBA. I am taking this incident seriously and looking at measures to be put in place to prevent this happening again in the future." 2 days later, the BBC reported on all this, saying on their website, "A high school's junior pipe band could lose their world title after an administrative error saw the wrong winner announced in one of the categories at the World Pipe Band Championships. The Royal Scottish Pipe Band Association said they had written to each of the bands who performed in Glasgow on Saturday and invited them to an online meeting to explain how the error will affect final placings. The correct results for the grade will be announced after full talks with the bands. Organizers said they deeply regret the incident, which has been blamed on a late change to the playing order, and will put in every effort to make good on the error that took place." A statement on the RSPBA website from the organization's board of directors said, quote, "Following a review of the placings data, it became clear that the results were not accurately administered, leading to a most regrettable situation where the incorrect results for this grade were announced. The RSPBA said the cause of the error in the Novice Juvenile Grade B category was a late notice change to the order of play and a failure to ensure that all documentation reflected the change." Here's the upshot of all that, I think. The judges assigned the correct scores to their corresponding bands. They were not the problem. They knew whom they were judging. The people who were entering those score numbers into the score calculation form, the compilers, as they're known, essentially entered all those numbers into the wrong boxes because somehow they didn't account for the late change in the order of competing bands. So they wrote down the scores for bands A, B, C, D, and E in the forms for bands D, B, E, C, and A. Or, something like that. So, there were two kinds of bands after the fact, and in fact, after the awards ceremony. The first kind of band was the band who, in truth, did better than its announced placement. A feeling of triumph, but no opportunity to bask in the applause at whatever the Pipe Band Championships uses for a final retreat. No hanging of medals around necks. As Gilbert and Sullivan put it, modified rapture. And the other kind of band was the reverse, the band that had done well, perhaps unexpectedly well, and then was told that, no, they actually hadn't. After the celebration, the rug was pulled out from under them. Full disclosure now, when Maureen Connor and I talked about where our trio section conversation would probably go before we recorded it, She suggested that we talk about the competition in general, but not this year's competition specifically. I had guessed that perhaps she might not want to talk about it, and it turns out that I was a very good guesser, so I absolutely respected the call that she made, because it was a tough subject to properly address in that podcast environment. And in fact, on the Capital District Youth Pipe Band's Facebook page, I presume it was Maureen who posted a message on August 22nd, I suspect right after that online meeting at which the RSPBA alerted band directors to its error, and after Maureen had had to turn around and communicate the very disappointing news to her band. That message began this way, quote, "To all of our friends, family, and fans, we are truly heartbroken to inform you that due to an error in the processing of the results for the World Pipe Band Championships Novice Juvenile B Division, all 12 bands in the final round received a different band's scores on Saturday. Capital District Youth Pipe Band did not win second place as a band or first place in drumming. Our final result is 8th place with a 3rd in drumming. We share our heartache with the other bands who thought they did better than they did, and the bands who thought they didn't do well but did and were deprived of the opportunity to celebrate on the world stage." But here's the thing that made me think that perhaps I would talk about this pipe band competition result and the mess that the RSPBA made of it here in this week's Second Strain. A wise philosopher once said, "How you do anything is how you do everything." And for that reason, no matter what I thought of Maureen Connor as I recorded our conversation, which by the way was a very positive first impression, my assessment was improved many times over still by how her heartbroken Facebook post concluded. It said this, quote, "To those bands who didn't know on Saturday how well they actually did, we send our congratulations. We are so proud of CDYPB and our pipers and drummers for a fantastic Worlds trip. We worked very hard to put out our best. We made it into the final round and we played really well. We hope that you will all join us in supporting our band members as well as the members of all the bands who are impacted by this truly devastating turn of events. At the end of the day, they are all world champions." And then, on her own Facebook page, Maureen posted this, quote, "I am overwhelmed and filled with gratitude at the outpouring of support from our piping and drumming community. It means so much to me and CDYPB pipers, drummers, alumni, parents, grandparents, families, friends, and fans that we live part of our lives in an environment that shows such empathy. We cheer each other's success and offer words of support when it doesn't go the way we want. How we handle such a crappy situation is more important in the long run. Thank you, Capital District Youth Pipe Band pipers, drummers, and families. We had a fantastic trip to the Worlds, that happens to be held in Scotland. We worked hard, made a lot of progress and improvement. My heart goes out to all the other bands and instructors and their supporters. We will get through this, and it will make us stronger. A cliche, but true. Ugh." I don't think I have to say a whole lot more. With the same meaning that a different wise philosopher once conveyed when he said, "If bands don't support each other, who the heck will?" In a moment of extreme disappointment, when she could have lashed out, could have had some pretty harsh and well-earned words for the event organizers who fell down on the job, instead, Maureen Connor reminded her organization and all of us in the band world that, again, we cheer each other's successes and offer words of support when it doesn't go the way we want. A mature response to this sort of thing is harder, but it's better. Although, in Maureen's shoes, I would have had no earthly idea exactly how many years from now we'll laugh about this. And another bit of full disclosure, I've only talked about these events and expressed any opinions about it all after having gotten the go-ahead from Maureen herself. I think I convinced her that it was a worthwhile topic to consider, not merely because we're heading into high school band competition season where everything's made up and the points do matter, but because it's a gentle lesson, in the words of Ron Burgundy, in staying classy. And after this grand pause, I'm going to make good on my promise from last week's episode to talk about a band that's not that one. You know, that one. Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, early in my experience of pursuing my master's degree in music education, I expressed a naive and idealistic thought. For those who have done this, the master's degree part, you may be wondering, how did you get all the way to studying for a master's degree in music education and still manage to be naive and idealistic? And that is a legit question. The sort of short answer is I was a journalism major as a UMass undergraduate, and some years later I did a career pivot and found that Boston University had exactly the academic opportunity that I needed when I needed it, and that's a story for another time. But suffice it to say, for 3 years, full-time, I was satisfying some course requirements that an undergraduate music ed major would have knocked off already, and then completed the rest of that coursework. Anywho, back to that idealistic statement I was making. I don't remember to whom it was expressed, but I said, confidently, I would rather have a band of 12 that could hardly play but so wanted to be there doing band that the small numbers didn't matter, than have a band of 112 kids who didn't much care one way or the other. In September 1999, I got my band of 12. And now, as TV shows occasionally do, here at the beginning of this trio segment, I will put up the graphic that says 3 months earlier. Coming out of that grad school time, I interviewed for a number of music teaching jobs, including one at the high school in a little mill town in Massachusetts' Blackstone Valley called Uxbridge. If you tripped and fell over in a southerly direction, you ended up in Rhode Island. That's about where it was. During the interview, and then after I was offered and accepted the job, it was made clear to me what the new high school music teacher's mandate would be. Simply, build something. That's great leadership. Good luck. The school had somehow managed not to have a standing music program for at least the previous couple of years. At the previous couple of graduation ceremonies, they'd brought in a brass quintet or some such thing. There was a middle school band and chorus, and there was music going on at the sprawling elementary school next door to the high school. But the only musical thing going on at the high school was a regular Thursday after-school gathering of garage band guitarists hosted by a pair of science teachers who themselves were pretty accomplished blues guitarists. They met upstairs in one of the science classrooms for an hour or so weekly and played together. And that was it. So, on the 1st of August, I immediately drafted a letter to be sent out to absolutely every student who was about to come to the high school late that month. If you've ever played an instrument or sung a note in your life, come join us. There'll be a band, probably. There'll be a chorus, probably. That sort of thing. There was a little information form at the bottom of the paper to fill out and detach and mail. Yeah, this was when the internet was brand new. We did mailings. And the forms came back, maybe 20 of them, if I recall correctly. So we were off and running. The second of the two things I did that day, the 1st of August, was to go to the high school and inspect my new teaching space for the first time. It was the school's auditorium. Now, Uxbridge High School had been built in the late 1930s, and twice in the next 60 years, the town had built an addition onto it. So the thing had grown like Topsy, all kinds of directions. When they added a brand new gymnasium, the previous one was repurposed to be the auditorium, and it had all the acoustic features of a 1930s gym, which meant that if you played quarter notes on a hi-hat at just the right tempo on the stage, the sound ricocheted off the back wall and you got eighth notes. Instead of leaving the floor as it had been, flat, as you'd expect a basketball court to be, they had built up the floor at a slight incline all the way from the stage in one end zone to nearly the other end zone of the old gym and filled all that with seats. And built into one corner of the room at that other end was an enclosed room with a 4-foot by 2-foot window facing the stage end. The plan was for that to be my little office. Cool, I got an office. I quickly deduced that I'd be cleaning that office out hard before getting to use it at all, because at that midsummer moment it was still a storage closet for drama props and costumes. Long story medium, we figured out where all those props and costumes could go, and a few days of labor later, I had a little space in which I could put a few file cabinets and a desk chair, and there turned out to be a built-in countertop right by the window, which could function as a desk. There were also shelves mounted on the nearby wall. Side story. Not long after I unearthed those shelves, the new principal wandered by and had a suggestion for me for what I could fill those shelves with. I expected him to say textbooks or something, but instead, he was cleaning out his old office. He'd previously been the assistant principal, and he had a record collection that he honestly didn't know what to do with, and did I want it? Because otherwise he was going to throw it away. Wishing to make nice, since that's what new teachers always do, I said, sure. And I was soon the proud owner of 6 large cartons full of 33 RPM LP records. When I went looking through them, I found a ridiculous variety of musical styles and eras, including one of the Stan Kenton Jazz Orchestra's live albums, signed by him. I took that one home with me. I still have it. Meanwhile, I had 20 little detached forms sitting on that new desk countertop thingy, describing various levels of musical ability and experience, and I was trying to make sense of them all. seeing what the constitution of my new little theoretical high school band and chorus might be, and it all came with one rather large caveat. There really was no place to put the kids. I mean, there was a stage upon which I was going to conduct all my rehearsals, but Uxbridge High School was working in a block schedule. For the uninitiated, this meant that students took 4 classes during fall semester and 4 different ones in the spring. In each semester, there was a course listing called Instrumental Music and one called Choral Music, which I'm sure the administration thought meant band and chorus, but what school was going to allow its students to utilize 25% of their time at school in a music elective? None. And even if the guidance department could schedule everybody who wanted to do band into one of those semester elective blocks, that could mean that there would be a band during fall semester but not during spring, or the reverse. Not ideal. So in the end, whoever could get scheduled for those times did, and on average I ended up with 1 and then 2 little chamber instrumental ensembles every semester, and we played tunes and talked about musical concepts, and thanks to the unpredictability of scheduling, I got some wacko instrument combinations. My favorite was the piano drum set French horn banjo quartet during my 2nd or 3rd year at Uxbridge, I think. But meanwhile, where was the band going to be exactly? Clearly, after school. And, as athletic directors will occasionally do, our athletic director offered me a great solution on the 4th afternoon in which I was excavating my office. The band could rehearse, he said practice, but we all know that's what individuals do at home. The band could rehearse in the evenings. That way it wouldn't conflict with athletic practices. That would really be best, he said. I smiled grimly, and as our conversation ended and this athletic director moved on to his next big idea down the hall, I thought to myself, no. If I rehearse right after the school day ends, I have a much better chance of getting students back because they never left campus. They go home for supper. It takes work to get them back, and most of them, according to my returned musical instrument forms, aren't old enough to drive themselves yet, so, hey, Mom! So, as is my personality sometimes, I smiled sweetly and did what I was going to do anyway. All those returned detachable musical interest forms suggested that the intersection of the 2 Venn diagram circles of Uxbridge High School athletes and Uxbridge High School potential music ensemble members could be measured in microns. And as it turned out, only a couple times in my 9 years at the high school did I ever need to negotiate with any coaches. That first school year began, and we announced the first meeting of the Uxbridge High School Band, Wednesday, after school, 2 p.m. to 3. Be there, aloha! And there was my band of 12. No instruments that day, but warm bodies. All looking as dubious as high school students will when you gather a dozen of them in a room and tell them welcome to band, which has not existed for years, and there's not too much equipment, and we're working on a stage which has a couple of spots where you probably don't want to step too forcefully because the wood floor seems rickety and the lighting isn't exactly ideal. We're band folks. When have those things ever stopped us, right? They looked back at me with facial expressions that were a remarkable combination of hopeful and doubtful, band geeky and too cool for the room. I knew that the hopeful and band geek would win out. I just needed to convince them of that. They were also probably musically smart enough to know that it wasn't exactly going to be the Eastman Wind Ensemble after I went around the room and had them chat about what instruments they played. Here's what we were. 2 flutes, a senior and a freshman clarinet, 2 trumpets, a junior and a freshman tenor saxophone, 5 percussionists, 3 of them freshmen, 1 a sophomore, 1 a junior, and a sophomore bass player. That's it. Side story, it wasn't until about January that I figured out, just from overhearing a conversation, that my bass player was really a percussionist who had taught himself bass guitar over the previous summer. He was that convincing a player. He still is, actually. Well, I said to my band of 12, clearly I'm going to be doing lots of arranging because who publishes for that instrumentation? Nobody. It was long before the days of the flex arrangement, after all. But that's okay. We'll play what we want. So, one of them asked cautiously, are we doing a concert soon? We are doing a concert, I replied, smiling as reassuringly as I could, when we are ready. I think that set lots of them at ease. And sure enough, the first concert for the new Uxbridge High School Band was late in April, to which about 24 parents and friends came, and we were thankful for them all. And then we played a couple of patriotic things and the national anthem at the in-school Memorial Day Assembly on the Friday morning before the holiday weekend, which is where the majority of the school's faculty and student body first heard us. Side story. That annual Memorial Day Assembly in Uxbridge always featured a group of Uxbridge residents who were also U.S. military vets, several of whom spoke to the kids about the predictable topics. That group, whose membership changed every year but not much, was swashbucklingly called the Uxbridge Flying Squadron. It was some years before I was told that the name had nothing to do with actual military activities, They all were from multiple armed forces branches, not just the Air Force. But instead, it was because of their participation in the Memorial Day observances at all the schools in town. At 7:30 a.m., they spoke at the high school. As soon as that was done, they went to the middle school, and after that, the elementary school. But the scheduling was always so tight that the timing was pretty much split second, and yes, they had to practically fly from one school to the next. So they were the flying squadron. And, so that the squadron could be properly seen by the high school student body during the assembly, they sat in a line of chairs on stage. Happily, my band was still of 12, and so we were able to fit ourselves down in the front corner of the auditorium around the grand piano that could fit nowhere else, certainly not on stage, and we played from there. And the two advantages of that were, one, I could play piano along with them, kind of filling out the sound a little bit, and two, the band kids weren't quite as on display as they could have been, and at that point, they were okay with that. Now, in answer to the question I would usually ask one of my interview guests, what's a piece of band music that you'd never played but would like to? With the Uxbridge High School Band, the answer really was all of them. We never quite had the instrumentation or the horses to play the whole suites or Granger or Holsinger or Tekeli, but I'm not convinced that our audience is worried about that. In retrospect, I'm sad that I wasn't able to expose my band kids to the really great pieces of band literature, and for the first 5.5 years I was there wasn't even a YouTube toward which to point them. In my ensuing 8 years there at Uxbridge High School, the band did expand in size. We topped out at 31 in 1 year, but then settled back to a comfortable 20 or 22. And we expanded in instrumentation, although I only ever had 2 trombonists during those 8 years, and oh, the sounds we made in the year they overlapped. And oh yeah, one last thing about the relationship between little bands and outsized athletic department wish lists. As that first year of Uxbridge High School band life concluded, I could see that I was going to need to address the elephant in the room. Traditionally, the band plays at football games, yes? Yeah, well, I had no interest in sending my band out to football games. For one thing, you put 6 horns, not even all of them actual brass horns, a bass player, and 5 percussionists out into the bleachers, and the sound goes up and away instantly, and the band feels rinky-dink and stupid. For another thing, at no point in my time in Uxbridge was there ever any remote buy-in to the marching activity from the kids. I showed them drum corps and college band videos, VHS tapes, y'all, and they were entertained and impressed, and nope. So, preemptively, before anyone even had a chance to ask any probing questions, I went to the athletic director and I said, I got a deal for you. What do you say in the late fall, early winter, I bring the band into the gym for basketball games? You put a band of, in that second year, it was going to be more like 10 wind players and full rhythm sections. I'll play keyboards. You put that into that little gym, we're going to sound like Michigan State in there. And I said to him, partly because it was fair and right, and partly because I didn't know whether the athletic director would have considered it, we'll play at both boys' and girls' basketball games. He was thrilled. I was thrilled. We stole the University of Delaware fight song to use as our own. We played little snippets at timeouts. We played some pretty current pop tunes at halftime. And I gotta say, the band polo shirts were pretty slick. Black shirts, orange logo over the heart. Those were the school colors. When we were designing them, one of my kids said, Mr. H, please tell me we won't wear bright orange polo shirts. I said, are you kidding? No, black shirts, built for the night. And the day after that game, I had band kids running into the auditorium, crashing my office and saying, Mr. H, from the moment I got on the bus to school, to the walk into the building, to my locker, to my classes, to lunch, all my friends were saying how cool it was that the band was at the boys' game last night, and they said we rocked the place, and the student section was dancing, and they were saying they were glad we were there. All of which was true. It was a good gig, and nobody froze to death. But in response, I looked at every kid who came to me with those stories that day and said, do me one favor. Remember this moment. When everybody said the band was cool, when all your friends wished they played an instrument so they could be part of that cool, remember what they told you. Write it down and keep that piece of paper. Do you have any idea? No, you might not. How rare a moment this is in the world? Never mind in this town. Never mind in this building. Do not forget this. And they didn't. They all stayed. A couple of years later, I looked at the graduating class of 2003, specifically the 7 seniors who had come to that first meeting as freshmen in the dim house of the high school auditorium and watched this insane, spindly new band director they'd never met before go on and on about how great it was going to be if only they would trust and believe. They trusted and believed and stayed. And I told them then as they graduated, and then all the times they came back to school to visit, which is a bigger deal for any teacher of former students than it even is to the former students who come back to visit, I told them that they built the foundation that meant that in the years that followed, the band got a reputation for being good at what they did, for being exciting in the concert hall and in the gym, and eventually out on the football field bleachers because, yeah, we did get out there later on. So, in answer to another question I would usually ask one of my interview guests, what's a favorite piece of band music that you played, outdoors or indoors? At Uxbridge, curiously, for me, one of them was Walk This Way by Aerosmith, and it was only just that famous guitar lick. Whenever an opposing basketball player was called for traveling, that's what my bass and guitar players cranked up. And it was their idea. And it got a laugh from the basketball parents who were sitting in the bleachers near the band. Two other side stories about being exciting in the gym. First of those stories, the rivalry between the towns of Uxbridge and Northbridge, on the school athletic fields at least, was your standard, ooh, we hate them rivalry. When you got the basketball schedule, you looked immediately for the home versus Northbridge date and you circled it twice. Boys hoop, girls hoop, football, you didn't miss it. And one year, probably my fifth or sixth at Uxbridge, the cable access channel TV folks from WCAT Channel 3 in Worcester came to cover the game as part of their series of high school basketball broadcasts. As my band kids setup crew and I were bringing our music stands and cables and power strips and such into the gym before game time, the TV crews were setting up too. The play-by-play guy for the night was Kevin Shea, and if you're a Worcester person, you know the name. He's now with Spectrum One News, but he'd been a fixture in Worcester area sports media for 20 years. In fact, I think he was the PA announcer for Holy Cross basketball while I was band director there, which I'll talk about elsewhen. But he was setting up with his tech crew, and when we crossed paths, he in his shirt and tie and I in my Uxbridge High School band polo shirt, he stopped me and said, "Oh great, the band is in tonight. You guys are phenomenal. You really rock the house." My little brush with tiny fame. But he was right. The other of those stories, and this is the one that in the moment made me think, we're really onto something here, is this. It was halftime of an Uxbridge girls basketball game that same year, in late January probably, and as such the band was kicking out tune after tune for the handful of fans in the stands. Sadly, this was long before the era of Caitlin Clark and women's sports being paid much attention. We finished one tune as the visiting team's players and coach were coming out of the locker room, the door to which was right next to where the band always set up, in one corner of the gym. The coach paused in front of me as I was sitting at my little keyboard and said, "Just to let you know, I'm going to call all of my team's timeouts during this second half, just so you guys can play more." I burst out laughing and I thanked him. And after he'd walked away, from behind me, one of my flute kids said, "Mr. H, did I just hear what I think I heard?" I said, "Dang straight you did." But none of that, or the 8,000 other true tall tales that I could tell, would have happened quite the way they did if it weren't for that first group of dubious but hopeful band kids, some of whom hadn't been band kids for a year or 2 or 3 since departing middle school. So who knows? Maybe they're listening to this, but they don't need to be in order to know one thing. It's a thing I've told them already. In the midst of rehearsals or before concerts or as they graduated or when they came back to visit or when we connected years later on Facebook, or when I've attended community band or chorus concerts that they've been performing in, or when I got to a gig put on by a group of my former students who named their little jam band after me, and that's a story for another time. Or, in a couple of cases, when I've had the pleasure of attending their weddings. I've told them this: Stephanie, Sarah, Julie, Leah, Christy, Sean, Jesse, Tom, Steve, Katie, Richard, Emily, you made that happen. 25 years ago, you created a great experience for yourselves. You made a band out of what might have seemed to the outside world, and to you at first, like a dire situation. Because band kids make it happen. That's the beginning of my Uxbridge High School tales. I'm sure it's not the last time I'll mention that little corner of my professional life. And other chapters of my band life have stories of their own, and with luck I'll bring somebody else on from those times to help me tell them. And if you've got stories like this, dear listener, I'd love to hear them and include them in a trio or a dogfight section soon, too. That's a lot of what BandWagon is for, after all. Oh, one more thing. I almost forgot. How could I forget? It's one of my best Uxbridge stories. Also, I did promise to explain this episode's artwork, which includes a picture of me holding what appears to be a 2x4. During one band rehearsal, probably during the last of my 9 years at the high school in Uxbridge, I was trying to describe to my band folks just how forcefully I wanted them to accent a particular note at a particular moment in whatever piece we were playing. And since I've been known to create curious analogies or other turns of phrase during rehearsals that were weird but caused band people to get the idea, I said to them, that accent has to be nuclear. They chuckled for a moment, but when we next got to that moment in the piece, the accent had crept out from behind whatever barrier of restraint that it had been using for cover, and indeed, the accent was nuclear. Good, I said. Play it like that all the time. You have my permission. The next year, I was teaching at Uxbridge's middle and elementary schools during the day, but I came back to the high school every Friday afternoon to rehearse the jazz band. As the year drew to a close, I discovered just what good memories the graduating seniors of the class of 2009 had, and what fun memories they retained. They gave me a gift as they departed. More accurately, they made me a gift, and in this week's episode artwork photo, I am holding it. My trombonist Eric, my keyboard bass player Jackie, my flutist Kayla, and my clarinet section leader Jill, who had been with me for their first 3 years at the high school, and then with me for jazz band during their senior year. They all conspired to build me a percussion instrument, a slapstick. You know, the thing that creates the sound of the whip in the middle of the sleigh ride. They'd cut a 2x4 into two about 16-inch long sections, stacked them, connected them at one end by a hinge they bought at Home Depot or somewhere, and voila, homemade slapstick. On one side of the resulting instrument, they wrote, "To Mr. H," which you can see in the picture, and they signed all their names. And on the other side, they wrote one single word in giant letters that filled the side of the 2x4 segment. That word was nuclear. I still have that slapstick right here beside me at my desk as I record. Of course I do. And the accents it makes are indeed nuclear. And now you know the rest of the story. And in a moment, I'll be back with a more recent tall tale that is also true. Here comes the dogfight. This week's dogfight chronicles, as I suggested at the top of the episode, a moment of intense worry, which happened to me this past week. It all started Monday morning, Labor Day. Okay, no, I won't do this whole thing in my Arlo Guthrie Alice's Restaurant voice, not that it's not very good. It is. Well, maybe I will lapse into it because it's one of those stories. Anyway, I started my day by firing up Facebook because that's what we old people do. I saw that red dot that elevated my dopamine levels or my adrenaline levels or some psycho-biochemical thing by way of telling me I had a notification. And of course, I automatically clicked on the dot because I was very excited about having a notification. But it wasn't until I read the notification that I realized that it wasn't nearly as much fun as those notifications are supposed to be. And my world froze for a long, long moment. The notification read, "Kid." It didn't. By the way, if you're unfamiliar with the protracted joke I'm going for here, go to YouTube and type into the search box Arlo Guthrie Alice's Restaurant and spend 18 minutes and 34 seconds with an American classic. And I'll try not to make this segment 18 minutes and 34 seconds long. But anyway, what the notification said was, "We suspended your page, Bandwagon with Rob Hammerton. See why." When you were a kid in school, did you ever sit at your desk on the back two legs of your chair, propped up with your hands on the edge of the desk, with you and your chair seemingly suspended in midair? And then one day, did you push with your two hands against the desk just enough so that suddenly your only connection to the good earth was those two back chair legs, and you thought you'd achieved something wonderful and amazing, only to discover that you'd just slightly overcooked that push, and gravity was suddenly realizing it was being ignored and was paying you a gentle visit to collect on the wager you'd made, the one that put some pretty serious money on you being able to defy said gravity? Remember that moment of wobbly insecurity when your whole world teetered on the edge of something, when it seemed equally likely that the difference between glory and disaster might just be how sudden your panicky reaction was? That was me, Labor Day morning. So I clicked on the button that said "See Why" because I indeed wanted to see why the mechanical Facebook algorithm thought it was best that it flagged my podcast's Facebook page for suspension. Next thing I knew, I was taken to a web page that said, "We have determined that your Facebook page goes against our community standards on account of a particular violation we call impersonation." I said to no one in particular, "Impersonation? Who do they think I'm impersonating? I'm trying to impersonate a successful podcast business, and suspending the podcast's page will not help much." So, with a series of mouse clicks that probably registered on the Richter scale, I instructed the mechanical Facebook algorithm not to go take a long walk off a short pier like I wanted to, but instead instructed the mechanical Facebook algorithm to accept my appeal of the decision. I clicked on the button that said "Appeal Review," and the Facebook algorithm said that it would, and that it might take a few minutes or a few days. And so, rather than curse at the Facebook algorithm like I wanted to, knowing it would do no good, I instead sat back and did something else for a while, and prepared to spend a few days considering what life might be like if there were no Bandwagon with Rob Hammerton podcast Facebook page. But of course I got impatient and went back on Facebook, and sure enough there was another red dot, and I clicked on it because of course that meant I had a notification, and that notification said the following words: "We have removed your page from Facebook. Your appeal was reviewed and we confirm that your page goes against our community standards. You can go to account status to review and respond to any restrictions and find more resources." Removed. Removed! Not even suspended anymore, for a violation that I had yet to comprehend. The Bandwagon Facebook page was no longer even suspended, wasn't even sitting on a bench marked Group W or nothing. It was removed, banished, never to be seen again. I was going to have to rebuild it from scratch in such a way that it avoided doing whatever it had done to violate community standards in the first place, in such a way that it didn't impersonate nobody. But even before I could properly pronounce the cuss words that were coming into my mind, yet another red dot appeared at the top right corner of my Facebook feed, indicating yet another notification. Before I even consciously thought about it, I clicked on that new red dot, because that's how dopamine works, and this other new notification appeared, and it said, "We restored your page." My innards were inundated with a curious combination of relief and utter confusion, and I can tell you that is one heady brew. The words "yay" and "what" came out of me simultaneously, and if anyone else had been in the room, I don't know whether they would have heard "yut" or "way" or something else, but no one was, which was probably a good thing, and I continued reading because the notification wasn't done being read. It continued. "We've found that our technology made a mistake suspending your page. Our priority is keeping the community safe and respectful, so sometimes we have to take precautions." I'd like to think that somewhere deep in the bowels of the Facebook establishment there are a couple of guys whose job it is to temporarily deactivate the mechanical Facebook algorithm and fix whatever robotic decision it was that made some innocent Facebook user feel like he was about to fall off his elementary school chair and get scolded by the teacher. And sure enough, those hypothetical couple of guys did what they did and quickly looked at the Bandwagon podcast Facebook page and realized that all we was trying to do was to publicize a harmless little old podcast project, and that of all the dangerous Facebook pages that were contained on the Facebook platform, this wasn't one of them, and they let it go on its merry way. Let me guess. It was my smug dismissal of artificial intelligence in the band world from last week's episode that brought down 4 minutes of cybernetic wrath upon the Bandwagon Facebook page's head, wasn't it? Anyway, I'll take one last pause to catch my breath, and then we'll wrap things up for this week. Thanks for continuing to listen. If you made it through that segment, you deserve a prize. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, I was going to try to again inspire you to submit your own George N. Parks crazy or lovely band or band-adjacent story by telling you another one of mine, but I think I've taken up enough of your time with silly tales for 1 week. If brevity is the soul of wit, it's very possible that I may have no soul. So instead, I'll encourage you to send me an email or record a voicemail telling me one of those GNP stories so that I can include it in next week's episode. And now, quick, let's roll the credits. That's Bandwagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. Bandwagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to our news items and conversation topics can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. Word of mouth really is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to Bandwagon on the Podbean app Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton, and remember, half a set of cymbals is not better than none.